All right, here we are again. It's Friday. Happy Friday, everybody. Love it. I had a week full of computer work, not on this thing, on the actual computer, trying to find 2.5 pages worth of knick-knack finished up parts. And so I'm about 85 or 90% on 5 or 6 different places here on this thing. And so rather than continue start, stop, start, stop, start, stop, I went ahead and stopped and answered all the questions that I had and found all the parts. And so, being as I've got it all listed out over here, and you guys like details so much, I figured I'd give you a detail update for today. So, I got my glasses here with me, put those suckers on, and let's see what we did. Okay, so first up, looks like we got an upper radiator hose, lower radiator hose. That's pretty standard. I found some UZ swap guys and figured out what hoses they were using. So I ordered up Sequoia hoses. So those are coming from Rock Auto. A transmission filter and gasket for the transmission pan. So that way I can put a new filter in it and put a new pan gasket on it and then put the dipstick on the side that I want it to. I think it's going to come out over here somewhere. So I got that coming. AC lines. So the suction and discharge lines. There's a few things to talk about on this air conditioner and oil filter, oil pressure sensor setup. So we got it in there. And as you can see, it's like a glove. It's tight like a glove. So over here is our fittings for our discharge and charge line. And so we've got a run off of here, and then we also have steering box right here. And so I had the original stuff in there, the rag joint and the stock shaft, and then I had the aftermarket stuff. But we ran into an issue with the aftermarket stuff. So this shaft that was supplied to me is actually a 3/4 36 spline shaft. It's 3/4 of an inch in diameter, and it's 36 spline. These are 36 spline from the factory, but come to find out, they're not 3/4. They're actually 17.4 millimeter Toyota stuff, and that translates to 11/16, which means that this is smaller than that, and this won't go in there in any way, shape, form, or fashion. And a lot of the people said that what they were doing is they were having problems with is they just jammed the screwdriver in there and spread that sucker out far enough to jam the thing in there and then clamp it all back down and was running with it like that. No. So the other issue that we were having is this rag joint right here. When it's put on to the steering, the edge of the rag joint was dragging on the hardware for the air conditioner pump. This hardware right here was dragging on that stuff. So I've got to get something smaller, and with the V8 in there, I don't like the rag joint. We want to go to a U-joint setup. So I ordered and found it's like a Flaming River joint. If you guys have ever done any of the muscle car stuff, Flaming River makes a bunch of it, and then these guys make some too. These Borgeson guys. And so what it is it's a U-joint with an 11/16 on it, which will match up to this 36 spline or 17.4. And then same thing on this side to match the steering box. And then it has a 1-inch smooth bore hole in the back of it. And this is what this is when you cut the rag joint off. I don't remember where the other piece is that I cut it off, but it's the other piece that goes in conjunction with this. It would normally sit there like that. When you cut that off, this is a 1-inch smooth shaft. So I'm going to clean that up. We're going to put that knuckle on there, square up the steering, and then that'll give me a whole bunch more room in here on this hardware to be able to fit the charge line and the discharge line over it. And so going back to our air conditioner lines that we ordered, we've got to go from the Toyota OE stuff in one way or another for the 4runner, 88 4runner, to O2 Tundra, O2 Sequoia. So somewhere in the middle here, we got to do some adaptation, right? And I decided that rather than try and mess with our core support and do something crazy on it, we're going to go ahead and stick with the OEM condenser and dryer setup. So once upon a time, somebody made both of these, and it's a discontinued part now, and the only one you can get is the back one. So I've got a new back one coming, new dryer coming. Then we're going to pop this front one off and pop the lines off, and we'll reuse these lines, reuse the front condenser. New dryer, new line setup. So the way this is going to work for air conditioning is, here's your original fittings and your hard line. Factory hard line is going to come off, and it's going to connect to factory condenser line, and that'll all run good into the new dryer, out of the new dryer, into the new condenser. This is the only portion of the existing setup that we'll reuse. It'll come out of this fitting here and either go back and across, or it'll come down and over and go over here to the pump, and then we'll have one more line that's got to come off and up over the top and go back and around and over to the evaporator. So we got to shoehorn all that stuff in there in that same little area where that knuckle is and where these discharge lines are and all that stuff. So the way we're going to do that is I've got Sequoia lines that'll come in with the discharge and charge line fittings, and it'll come off of there and give me enough hose to come around and go to the general location of where the Sequoia condenser would be. And then I'm going to use, and I've got a universal AC line kit. So that's what I'm going to use to adapt the two hoses together. And then I've got all the extra fittings to be able to adapt that factory hose to this condenser to the factory evaporator, and then finish the loop out with the high and low pressure fittings, the Zerk fittings, and all that stuff should be good. The only question I have with the system is once I get the steering into place, which all this stuff's on its way, when I get the steering into place, whether those OE charge and discharge fittings are going to have enough clearance to clear my new steering setup, or whether I'm going to have to go to like an aftermarket fitting on this side of it and then adapt my line to the aftermarket fitting so that they've got more room to come like 90 degrees this way rather than coming out towards the steering, because the steering shaft's going to be right there. So that's the only last question I have to answer for hooking up the air conditioner. And like I said, that'll be when we get this U-joint shaft in, fix that all up, put steering back together, hang some lines, and then we'll answer that fitting question. I've got two sources for custom fittings, or, you know, it's like LS swap stuff, and then there's like 3 or 4 different versions of this one, of this pump, and then, yeah. So when I get to that point, we'll get the fittings put on. So where we go back to, AC lines, O2 sensors, because we put the headers in and we're putting this in, I'm going to put new O2 sensors in it. I didn't have any used exhaust manifolds or anything like that, so it's got new O2 sensors coming. Temp sender, that's the one that's in here. It's a single wire on the intake. Let me see, I just pulled it off. That sensor down in there on the donor motor, the ears were broken off of the sensor, so I just got to replace the sensor so that way that doesn't have a risk of popping off of there, because it's going to be important. Brake booster. So we're going to a T100, Toyota T100 power brake booster, because it's dual diaphragm. It doesn't have a single diaphragm, which will help push the new brakes that we'll talk about, because I'm going to upgrade the master cylinder and the rears and all that stuff. So it's going to be a T100 power booster with dual diaphragm. That's on its way. Steering joint, oil filter adapter. So down under here, you can see we're pretty tight. That oil filter from the factory measures out at 2.75, so about 3 inches by 3.5 inches. So there's enough room. There's 3.5 inches in here, but the problem is you can't spin it on, spin it off, and it's all tight, and when the motor rocks and all that stuff. So what I'm going to do is I got a relocation kit coming that screws onto this fitting here, basically, so it leaves everything all factory, screws onto this fitting, and then I can run some lines, and I'll run some lines up here in the engine compartment somewhere and mount that oil filter like up high so that you can easily get to it when you do oil changes. So the only thing that would be different from the factory is just the adapter plate that I put on, screw onto there, 2 lines that come up, the plate that's up here that the oil filter screws into, and then we'll use an OEM oil filter. CCV sensor. So there was an extra plug in the evap system. I said in the last video that I didn't have a donor rig. This is from a 2002 Tundra or Sequoia, and I didn't have a donor Tundra or Sequoia there. I went to the wrecking yard and got the evap box. The evap box came with these 2 sensors on it, and I thought that was going to do the job. Then I had Mr. CCV. And I talked to, shout out at Mike at Off-Road Solutions. He's the one who built all this harness. He called me last week and said, yeah, what you're thinking is right. There's another little sensor that's usually bolted right here on the Tundra and Sequoia that is in line with this vacuum system. And you just need to find the appropriate one. That'll run it, hook it up, all good to go. So I've got that CCV sensor coming. It was not easy to find. That sensor, I put... God, I don't know how many hours into trying to figure out which one was right. All the plugs are the same for this plug right here. It's the same one as this one down here. And it's the same as these ones. So it was tough, but I figured it out. I got it. It's coming. Fuel fittings. So I've got down here, I've got coming from the factory pump right here. So I need to hook up into it and then put a heat shield on it. And then I need to come up here to the Tundra inlet for the fuel rails and then run a fuel line from here to there. So I got the fittings coming, new condenser coming, new dryer coming, and then I got a crimping tool to be able to crimp all that stuff together. Rear disc kit and front rotors and pads. So we got the disc brake kit coming, and I told you those were the Cadillac calipers that have the e-brake cable, and then I've got the aftermarket e-brake cables coming with it. And then we did drilled and slotted rotors, pads to match front and rear, so we'll have new brakes all the way around. Those are on the way. Okay, ready for page 2? Okay, let me get it flipped. It got deep quick yesterday. I'm keeping some of this stuff from you just for the customer's privacy's sake. Okay. Now where are we at? Let's just keep on the brakes and we'll come back to case. So then when it comes to the brake system, I told you I was going to do the T100 booster. Well, that's because I'm doing a upgraded 1-inch master cylinder. So it's got a 1-inch bore instead of a 3/4 inch bore inside the actual master. So when you push on the pedal, it'll push a lot more fluid out to the disc brakes, which is going to push harder hydraulically. There's a 1-inch hard line that goes in conjunction with it because the factory line that's here, that goes from here to the junction, is smaller. So that's coming with it. And then braided line kit and residual valve. So when you take from drums to discs, drums are what's called full float shoes. So when you release the brakes on a drum, the shoes collapse inside of the drum and they're actually full float. You don't have any friction you don't have any friction or rubbing on the drum. The discs, when you do disc brake setup like the front, it has to have just a slight amount of pressure left on that rotor in order for the brakes to work the way the brakes are supposed to work. And without the residual valve, you get bleed off back from here to the proportioning valve that releases those pads back here. And so the residual valve is to prevent that and to keep a little bit of pressure on those pads and make sure the rear brakes are going to work to where they're supposed to. And then what was the other thing I just said? Oh, the braided line kit. And then, so because of the lift, this had factory brake lines on it. And so I've got replacement kit for the rubbers because these were old rubbers. And then we'll put stainless braided lines on there so that they have less of a tendency to flare. Like when you blow up a balloon and it flares like that. The rubber has more of a tendency to flare up than what the braided stainless does. So when you push on the brake, it transfers that force and allows that to kind of a little bit before it applies the force to the brakes. The stainless lines transfer that hydraulic force through to the brake pads much more effectively. They last longer. They're stainless. You don't got to worry about them cracking. Cool. Good. All right. I guess we'll talk about case drive lines. Oh boy. This was fun. I don't know how you Toyota guys do it. There are like 7, 8, 10 different versions of yokes for 4runner, 4-cylinder, pickup, V6. Oh my God. So most of this setup from the factory, which was a 3.0 V6 automatic transmission, 4-wheel drive IFS. Okay. It's got the change driven transfer case. That's now I know it's 30 spline. We went to 4runner, which is 27 spline gear driven transfer case, which did come in some 4runners, the turbo pickups, the older pickups, bunch of different stuff. Okay. Well, like, seems like every time they made a change on the pickup, they made a change on the flange. So, these are the factory flanges off of the Toyota transfer case, the 4runner transfer case. And so this pumpkin here has got a 60 millimeter by 60 millimeter bolt pattern. Okay. Front case, factory diff. Same thing, rear axle, factory axle. Same thing on the transfer case where it came off on the factory 3.0 transfer case. And then the front changed and is not 60 by 60. This is a like 70 by 61.3 rectangle pattern. And these are, I don't know. Anyway, so then I had the yokes that were on the transfer case that I got, the 4runner. And so I got to compare those to what I got from the factory to what I've got on my drive shafts, because I'm going to order new drive shafts. So I get on and measure all that stuff, and I'm like, okay, I know what I got. Let's get on the website. And I can't match up this yoke flange. I can't match up that yoke flange. And nothing I have that will bolt to that transfer case matches up to anything. So, yeah. Let me see how I can explain this to you guys. Okay, hold on. Just uno momento. You guys like watching me fumble around, right? Well, that's what I'm going to do here for a second. So, I'm going to put this over here. I'm going to put this right there. Does that work? Nope, that's not working out. Okay. So, factory Toyota 4runner V6, front yoke, front shaft, 70 by 61.5. On a transfer case, 60 by 60. Okay. So, which way do I go when I order the new drive lines? Which way do I go? Well, this wasn't on the list for Tom Woods. Then I measure all this stuff out. It doesn't match up. Why is there 17 different options? Why don't I have what I have? Okay, here's the moral of the story. The front and rear got reordered so that I have front and rears output flanges for my new transfer case, my 4runner gear driven transfer case, that are 27 spline back here, so they go into the transfer case. And then out here they're 60 by 60 mounting pattern, so that I can use a 1310 factory style driveline in the rear and in the front. We don't need to upgrade to 1350. We're not doing solid axle. That'll let me put new output yokes on the front and the rear of the transfer case that'll match up to the 60 by 60 there and the 60 by 60 there, so that our new drive shafts that are coming from Tom Woods will have 60 by 60, 60 by 60, 60 by 60, 60 by 60, and everything will be happy. The other part of the equation is that not all of these have the same bolt diameter. Some of them have 11 millimeters, some of them have 8 millimeter, some of them have 10 millimeter, and they're all different. So I also standardized that in the entire rig, and all of the flanges are going to have 10 millimeter hardware, and the new drive lines are going to come with new hardware. So I can basically just take them out of the box, put them in, they're warranted, they're 100% brand new from front to rear, so we don't have to worry about cutting, shortening, placing a U-joint, spline condition, replacing a U-joint, flanges not matching, viscous coupler in who knows what condition. Yeah, we do away with all of that unknown and all of the struggles by just struggling through computer work yesterday and getting all of that stuff coming. Oh boy. So, front drive line ended up being 41 inches, 60 by 60 mounting pattern, 10 millimeter hardware. That's the rear. Front shaft, 30.5 inches, 60 by 60, 60 by 60, 10 millimeter hardware. 2 replacement yoke flanges. And then when we take the flanges off, we want to put new seals. So I've got new seals coming for the front and the rear. Whew. Then, stereo equipment. Way to sift through stereo equipment and try to figure out. So this is going to get a Memphis audio system. So we're going to do Memphis Audio 8 mini sub back here in the back. We're going to do a 4x100 front and rear amp. We're going to do 5 1/4 components. So we'll have a tweeter to mount out here. We'll do 5 1/4s back there. And then we're going to do 4-inch dash speakers up there in the dash. And we'll be able to keep those all in the factory locations and have amplified sound to all 6 front speakers and a mini sub in the back. So between that and the sound deadening and a new head unit with a rear view camera that'll work with the tailgate down, should complete the audio system. Savvy? Ugh. All right, we're waiting for boxes to come in. In the meantime, I can do doors, tailgate shifter, some miscellaneous stuff, hang the radiator. Yeah. Appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. Happy Friday. We'll talk to you very soon. Y'all take care.